Missed any of our conversations? Let's catch you up on YouTube Repeat. Subscribe and stay updated. We are Radio 537.
My name is Lunga Mantashe. I am the Deputy President of the PAC of Azania.
Mm-hmm.
I am also a lecturer at the University of Fort Hare. I'm also a Deputy President of the Convocation of Walter Sisulu University.
Mm-hmm.
I am basically also a student of history, politics, religion, economics, and anything that matters in relation to history. Of course, I was not taught of these things at school. Part of the education that I've received within the student movement called PASMA, the component structure or the child of the PAC, one of the rare breeds of a student revolutionary movement in this country. So I would say to you, I was born and bred in politics, and I was baptized by the student challenges at university. And that's how a lot of things to me became clear that something has fundamentally gone wrong in 1994, and that there was something of the highest form of manipulation and deception, the failure of the leadership, the failure of leadership as far as people are concerned, but not the failure of leadership as far as a small clique of the political elite were concerned. And to me, it became clear that something fundamentally went wrong in the secret negotiation. And I began to ask myself, how was it possible that everybody was fighting and a few group of icons spoke on our behalf in our absence, in the presence of a national broadcaster? They had a conversation alone in our absence against us and for themselves. And as a consequence, people have not stopped living in the shacks. In fact, the shacks are worse these days. People have not stopped being impoverished. This country of the world icon, has, it's the most unequal society in the world. And you've got to ask yourself an honest question, Tobani. You've got to be sincere, and your listener has to be, they have to have a certain form of honesty, deep reflection, a certain sense of looking the truth in the face and say, there was a lie. The whole issue that people were fighting for in the 90s, the whole issue, the very essence, the very spirit of the struggle, the struggle of 360 years was compromised at the altar of a fake, phony, greedy, corrupt negotiation. It was a misnegotiation even. For how can you negotiate in a position of weakness? And so these things really did come to me, and as a student of politics and having been recruited by the student movement, PASMA, it became clear to me that the kind of education, political education that the student movement was providing was central to the understanding. So as I talk to you, I could say to you freely that I probably am the freest man on planet Earth because knowledge gives freedom. And that's what the PAC has given to us. As the children of his soul. If you don't have anything else, at least you must have a peace of mind. And in this country, the majority of the people can never have a peace of mind because they don't know what's going on. And so this was just by way of introduction to say who I am. And you might notice that I've not said where I come from, because I come from this country. I am a citizen of this country. And my home and my place of birth is Willow Vale, but it's irrelevant to the questions at hand today. The most relevant question at hand today is, what does it mean to change the situation of our people?
Sure. Well, Boti, thank you so much for that introduction. It is full. It is packed. Sure. I'm sure even the listeners at our home, they can tell, Boti, yeah, it's going to be a real conversation. Or to melee message with the fire flame emojis, the city. Lunga Mantashe. That is to say, yeah, already we have already gone into that, because some of the things that you have already touched on, but they're exactly at the core of our conversation in Namhlanje. Well, before we get into the conversation here to Namhlanje that we'll be talking about, which we have already touched on, I want you to just tell me, Uti, you have already touched on this, ukuba your need to seek information, ivuswe kukubona, what was happening around you, and being introduced to the PAC as well. But beyond that, zeziphi ezinye izinto that have kept you to be this person who is so, when I look at your work and when I hear you articulate yourself, to be this passionate about the matter of addressing some of this hidden information that is not delivered to the people, and izinto that are sometimes hidden, perception yabo kuba singaziperceive ngendlela eyiyo. Because when you even talk about right now, as you said in your introduction, ukuthi even the listener at home has got to ask themselves the fundamental questions, ukuthi so many years later, today we still find so many people still in shacks. We still find so many people not actually seeing the reality of what they were promised, what could have happened. Indolena that makes you so passionate about this cause and ubekle paths ukuyo ngoko in life.
Look, there are a couple of things, but the most obvious thing is that if you grow up as a black person in particular in this country, you have two options. Mm-hmm. One is to teach yourself why things are this way, the way they are. You see, the second one is to sit down and not care and wait for politicians to do that on your behalf. And if you do the latter, you are in crisis. Sure. Because you are hoping for political thugs to tell you what's wrong in your society. Mm-hmm. So the question of reading is crucial. Mm-hmm. In the PAC, not reading is made a crime. It's a crime. It's a constitutional crime not to read. Because if you don't read, you can't understand. You have to wait for somebody else to tell you what's going on. And this Tobani is not a mistake. You've got to understand that also. It's a systematic design. Just before 1994, during 1994, and after 1994, the idea was to disarm the people. It was to disarm their intellectual clout by taking power from them, which they have had since 1960s, in the beginning of the anti-pass campaign. It was so 1994 brought with it the disarming and the deculturing, you see, of the people's mental structure. It was a period of total reconstruction of the perception of struggle. People had to think differently, because suddenly they were going to elections and their leaders have lied to them and they've told them that if they started getting a right to vote, they can vote whichever government they want. So what does it matter to vote a government that you want? Do you even want that government? Or is the media telling you that that's the government that you want? So the challenge for me, and critically, was the idea of how we have become so decultured and restructured, and deconstructed by post-1994 dispensation. You see, I mean, one of the things that happened in 1994 was that, military wings were told to bring back the arms to the government and to integrate with the South African Defence Force. In other words, we were told at the period of a massive struggle for land restoration that we should abandon the idea of looking for land and wanting land again, and we must give our right and our power to the executive in the name of a government and in the name of a parliament. And so if you think about the importance of reading and understanding and unlocking the historical evolution of the present, you see, you recognize that 1994 was a sham, and for me that was to me the most interesting thing to think about. So and this is what I would say to people. I would say to people, liberation and freedom is not in the hands of politicians, and you can never be freed by politicians. You can never. There's no way. You can read any history book. You will never find a politician that freed anybody. And the reason why today we're sitting at 30% of unemployment despite being free, is totally linked to this nonsensical idea that you've got to give your political power to a leader, and then you must wait for the leader to give you a job. Now tell me, Tobani, and maybe your listeners might help me. Is Parliament a business entity? Does it run any business? Does it employ anybody?
No.
Do they sell any coal?
No.
Do they mine any coal?
No.
Do they run a business? Are there not, the people who are, most of the guys who are in Parliament actually are shareholders of companies that are oppressing the same people, that are retrenching the same people. But they themselves don't run any businesses. They are shareholders. They take taxpayers' money and invest part of that portion that we pay them, which we have never decided on. So that's the challenge. So at the center of this challenge was some people call it a sellout deal. But I tend to say that you can't say someone who really knew what they were doing. You can't say they were selling out. They knew exactly what they were doing. They understood, and they are the ones who benefited immediately after 1994. And we have all people, to be fair with you and honest, all people who were leaders of trade unions at the time, like the current president, who was the leader of NUM. Was a leader of NUM. Cyril Ramaphosa, the leader of NUM. This guy came from being a union leader to being a businessman. How did it happen? Why did not the ordinary man in Tanzania become the same thing? Why not the same guy in Soweto become the same thing? Why this guy? Something has gone wrong. And what has gone wrong at the center is that the land which was the basis of that struggle, was basically abandoned. We were now suddenly told that land is going to be bought and sold. And maybe I can share a small point here about this question of buying and selling. Tobani, you were born here in this land. You are going to die and leave this land.
Yeah.
Where do you get the right to sell the land?
Sure.
How can you have a right to sell a national treasure, a national asset? How can land become a property to be sold and bought in the market? Does not land belong to the Africans? Does not land belong to the generations to come? Imagine if King Shaka had sold the land. Imagine if Mushasha had sold the land. You don't sell the land. Land is not for sale.
It's not for sale. Sure.
No. Land is not for sale. It's a European idea, and it's an idea linked to imperialism, racism, and capitalism. That's why in the 90s, right at the point of negotiation, a new country in South Africa was being called, and that country was called Orania in 1991, literally. And Boshoff, a son-in-law of Verwoerd. A son-in-law of Verwoerd was evicting black people and colored people in Orania because Boshoff had bought the land. Do you understand? And Bishop had some kind of a piece of paper called a title deed.
Title deed. Mm-hmm.
And now today you've got Afrikaners in Orania calling it the country of their own. And at that same time, Tobani, we were negotiating this freedom. What were we doing negotiating a freedom when land was being sold in Orania? You see, you understand the point. So you can't sell the land, because if you sell the land, you displace the people. The reason why people get evicted day in, day out is not because that land cannot be used. It's because that land is held in speculation for purposes of doing business that has got nothing to do with the people themselves.
Yeah.
Did you see a naked man in the Western Cape getting removed in a shack?
Yeah.
Embarrassed, dehumanized in a free country during a lockdown? What a shame.
Because someone has the title deed.
Because someone has a title deed over that land. There is something fundamentally wrong about selling land. You can use land, yes, but sell it. No. You know,
sure.
You live in a country where you have to go to a bank and say, the security is my land. How can land be used as a collateral? This is precisely why this challenge is related to the IMF are key for me, you know, when you think about this problem. This is why. Because you have got in the South Africa that you live in, you've got to respect property rights of individuals. And I am saying to you, in the PAC, we were never taught that. In the PAC, we were taught a simple principle: the land belongs to the African people, not to somebody. And therefore, the land belongs to posterity. The land belongs to posterity all the time. It belongs to the next generation. We have a responsibility to use the land sparingly and carefully and not pollute the land and do what they were trying to do at Kolobeni. No, they were trying to do at Kolobeni. Trying to forcibly remove the people there from Ekolobeni so that they can mine for 22 years and then leave people of Ekolobeni hungry after 22 years, because they would have destroyed the entire ecological system. How do people live in a soil that has been deforested and devegetated,
stripped of its minerals? Wow.
Yes. Just because of minerals that will be mined for a titanium that will be mined only for 22 years. Then what?
After that, the people are left stranded.
There you've got it. People there. They are not just left stranded. They are going to be left sick to death. And because they've got no access to a hospital, because the hospital is too far. And what did the ANC do recently? The ANC recently tries to manufacture scooters, freaking scooters, to go to rural areas as a part of a constant dehumanization process of the African people.
The African people by other African people. It's really a shame. But Lunga, I just want us to take a short song break, and you've already touched on this topic that we are talking about today, and I just want to completely give the floor to you, and you know, to really deconstruct the state that we are in. 26 years later, we are now saying we are living in a democratic state. What is the reality of what we are living in? So after the break, I want to give you the floor so that you can take us through, how you view everything that is happening in this so-called freedom, if I may put it like that, that we claim that we have right now. So ngicela nje ubasisese Salamanzi, and of course umphulaphuli pha. If you have your messages and your voice notes, you can send them over Pago 063-698-7566 mandiphinda 063-698-7566. Mphulaphuli, this is on the table. There is nothing that is off the table from A to Z. Name it, we'll talk about it. And I know this topic is not one that we can say basawiqoshelisa namhlanje but Lunga. Kodwa ke, that's why I just want to give you the floor will be completely yours after we come back from this song, so that you can take the listener on this journey and the reality of our 26 years of so-called freedom.
Yeah. So thanks again. I just wanted to make a point here, a couple of points, as we reflect on this question. And that I have already said to you that in 1991, Orania was created. In other words, another country was created in this country at the time of democracy. And they knew exactly what they wanted. If you can read their own historical records, they knew that they were trying to create pockets of white culture so that they could have a fort. They were trying to build their own fort so that whatever happens in this country, they are ready, and they are training militarily, okay? And they are taught to hate African people. They've always hated African people for as long as, Lord knows when. That's one of the things that happened in 1991. Over 500 people were evicted there by force. At that same year, in 1991, value-added tax was introduced. Some people think that VAT has always been part of our lives. Tax. VAT was introduced in 1991. It was introduced at 10%. Today, it's 15%. Correct. When that VAT was introduced, big corporations and big companies in what was called the company gains tax, or corporate tax, those companies got tax breaks from over 48%, which was charged by the National Party, to just roughly around 30%, which was now going to be charged by the new government, the government of the free. In other words, the people of this country were going to be asked to pay more money now that they are free, and the corporations that have exploited them, that have abused their labor, those corporations were going to be given a tax break. There is nothing that can be more ridiculous. I mean, if anyone is in their right senses, you can never allow such a thing unless you are interested in the outcome. And at that same time, in the 90s, just before the IMF gave us a loan of $850 million. And we were also to pay the debt that was created by the apartheid government when it was buying ammunition to kill our people in Soweto.
Sure.
During 1976.
Having to be the ones to pay a debt that was made for weapons that were going to kill us.
Yes, that's the point I'm making. Companies like Mercedes-Benz in the form of Daimler Chrysler, companies like IMB. You see, these companies provide infrastructure and technological support for the National Party, so that the National Party could enforce the Dom Pass laws, which saw hundreds of people killed in 1960, and which saw hundreds of them injured. These were the companies. And, to make matters worse, in the 80s, P.W. Botha's government actually employed Barclays, what you now know as ABSA, in South Africa, Barclays, Standard Bank, and the mining magnate Anglo-American. Those companies became the advisors of the defense ministry of P.W. Botha. And what have these companies paid for what they have done? Have they paid a single cent?
No.
Did they even appear before the TRC? What did they say in the TRC? The TRC itself was a fake and a phony and a waste of time. It was a waste of the feelings of our people. A vomit on the struggle of our people. And I'm sorry to say that. I'm sorry to even say that, a religious man had to preside over such a fake piece. Man of God. It has to be added. So you see, that's what happened, Tobani and the listeners. And for me, and for the PAC, this is a crucial issue because the PAC is now launching a positive action campaign. And in this positive action campaign, the PAC is saying, look, you have to stop putting your faith to politicians. You have to stop because they have messed up, they have screwed up. They are responsible for your land having not been returned up to date. they are responsible also for peddling the nonsense that we don't know what to do with the land. Let me ask you a question and your listener a question.
Yes.
Who is working in the farms as we speak? Is it not a black person?
It is.
Is it not us who are working at Grabo? You know, is it not us who are working in the farms, chicken farming, whatever, poultry, dairy milk, whatever? Is it not us who are working in the mines? Do we not know how to mine now?
Yes, we know.
I mean, Lord knows now. We've been mining long before these settlers came in, and now they want to tell us that we don't know what to do with the land, and that seems to be the reason. And to get back to the point I was making, part of the challenges is that we have allowed land to be for sale, because what now happens is that an African person, being ignorant, gets the land that belonged to his ancestor and then sells this land to a white man again.
Oh.
And the governing party keeps quiet. It lets it slide because that's part of the project. Keep neoliberalism working, keep the system going, keep imperialism, going, keep racism, going. There would never in this country be racism. No person who has no land can ever be racist. That's precisely why you and me can't be racist, because we don't have land to claim superiority over. We were defeated at the altar of a fuss. So that's the thing. So if you are then trying to talk about the problems of today, these problems were systematically structured and created. Or maybe if you don't understand the point I'm trying to make, let me ask the point differently. If you create a constitution that says South Africa belongs to all who lives in it, black and white, are you not? Let me put the question again in a different way. If you wanted to build a square house, should not your foundation be square? Should your foundation be round? Are you going to get a square house in a round foundation?
Definitely
or a
not.
Round foundation in a square house?
Definitely not. The foundation should be the same as the structure that you want to build.
Absolutely. Otherwise, you are building nonsense. You're building nonsense. The entire architecture of your house is going to collapse. And that's precisely what's happening in South Africa. South Africa has collapsed at the point of the foundation because we have allowed ourselves to be hoodwinked by settlers who knew exactly why they came here. And they didn't just come here because it was fun. They came here because they were searching for markets. And that's what we say. See, and therefore, the problems today relate to the question of the return of land. Because those people who have land are not hungry. That is without a doubt. The Stellenbosch mafia has no problem. It basically controls about 40% of the supply of agricultural products, including winery in this country, and it is exporting. And we are told that South Africa is exporting something and something and something to the world. South Africa is not exporting anything. Stellenbosch is exporting things. We're not exporting anything. What have you and me exported?
Nothing.
We have exported nothing. But what politicians and corporations do is they do things in the name of the people. In the name of democracy, in the name of freedom. Our responsibility then, in our positive campaign, is precisely to question the idea that South Africa is an exporter. You see, because the people in this country, we call this country Azania, people in Azania are not exporters of anything.
Nothing.
Yeah, no, we're not exporters of anything. And so that is the center of the challenge. Now, what had happened in 2017, just to get to where the issues are. In 2017, there's a promise to basically have a land debate. First of all, Tobani, the question of land is not up for debate. So that's just the first issue. The question of land is not up for debate. Once you bring the question of a debate, the question of land up for a debate, then you are going to get into all sorts of legal problems, because you have not created any jurisprudence to even adjudicate issues in a court of law. When the government took over in 1994, the jurisprudence was not changed. The entire judicial architecture was left in the same way. So if you go to a court of law, if you have no money, you are less likely to win a case. You are even less likely to go to a court because you have no money to go to a court with. Because justice in this country costs money. And therefore those with more money have more justice. And therefore it is true what the Greeks once told us a long time ago. During the time of Socrates, they told us that justice it was Thucydides who said that justice is the interest of the stronger. And therefore you can't go and claim land and say this is my land, this is my father's land, blah 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 blah. We've tried that. I mean, the ANC failed dismally, shamingly. It has no shame though. In 1997, people applied for land. They didn't get it. Most of them, And in 2017, we were told by Mr. Mutlante, who was himself a president in this country, who must equally be held accountable and liable for what had happened. You see, Mr. Mutlante, in his high-level panel report, concluded, and this is the person in the ANC who makes this conclusion. The same ANC people go and vote for. He concludes as follows. He says that, look, it will take 700 years to get the land back for those who have applied for it.
Sure.
Now, what is the lifespan? What is the life expectancy of a South African?
Of eyeball.
So in other words, you will have more than 10 generations dead by that time. The Christian will even tell you that by that time we will be in heaven, or in hell. It's not going to happen. It's a joke. So, and then the debate then begins. The debate then says, let's debate expropriation of land without compensation. What expropriation? Do you even know what expropriation actually means? The word expropriate means to take something by force. Now, how can a person who has direct genealogical connection with the land take their land by force legally? You can't take your land by force. When you are returning your land, it's not by force. It's justice. It's revolution. So the idea that because this makes white people victims in this country, and it makes us predators. That very same debate that says we're going to forcibly take land from whites makes us predators. It makes us the bad guys, and it makes the white guys, the victims of the entire situation. It can't happen like that. It's a shame. It's a shame for it makes one angry. It's a shame. It's there's nothing more ridiculous. I don't know whether it's because we don't know the English language that we should not have known that what we meant by that. Even if you are going to go to a court of law and take your case there and say, oh no, the government said we can now expropriate the land. You have a constitution that says South Africa belongs to all who live in it. Now, how can you go and take land of another person then if South Africa belongs to everybody who lives in it, black and white? So we're in crisis. Our crisis is not going to end. The whole farcical debate in 2017 was a joke. Into nje yohambisa ixesha, yokuchitha ixesha labantu, yokunika abantu ithemba elingekhoyo, yokubathembisa ngezulu elingazufika. Bantu babalinda ukuza kanxele, bubutsotsi. And obubutsotsi thobani bubutsotsi obu bubutsotsi bezifundiswa abafunde ingqondo zabantu bababona uba abantu bethu sabenza izidenge ngo-1994 bayamkela loo nto sabexuthela nezibhamu bexuthela izibhamu sabashiya bengenantolwa noba sebefuna ukulwa sathatha izibhamu sa-creator i-police force ogqiba kuthiwe hayi la mapolisa azogcina umthetho la xa nisetoyitoyini nisilwela inkululeko yenu kuthiwe hayi amapolisa azogcina uxolo kuba kuthethwa nge-human rights. Hayi kaloku sanophazamisa amalungelo abanye abantu. Kaloku asithi sanu-exercise ilungelo lenu qha kaloku ilungelo lenu malingaphazamisi elethu. Ngokwayivaphi le ntsomi ethobani? Ngokwayivaphi intsomi yabantu abathi amalungelo wabo mawangaphazanyiswa ngabantu? Ungayifumana njani inkululeko enamalungelo aphicanayo? So that is the state of our crisis. The state of our crisis is that we have got no land, and we did not receive any justice in the fake TRC. And that after that, we were told to wait for freedom, and that freedom never came. We are still waiting. You know, the people in the shacks are waiting for politicians. Abantu sithi politicians sizitreat ngathi zicelebrate. We vote le celebrity. You see, le celebrity politician ihle kuwe sayimane siza kuwe ngalo maxesha. Naxa isiza kuwe, you see, these politicians only come to the people only to flex their muscles, political muscles, because their capital depends on their constant demonstration that they can flex the muscles. They have got the muscles to vote for. So these muscles are just instruments. So these muscles are just instruments used to attain power. It's a shame in this country. In this country, over 18 million people live under social grants. See welfare state.
Yeah.
Ngobani amaxhoba ngoku who are going to be the victims now after the COVID? Who has lost the job? Which politician has lost the job? A job?
None.
After this COVID?
None.
And we can even put the question differently and turn it around. Which business leader in a corporation or a mine has lost his mind as a consequence of COVID? Is it not us? Abemane betshintsha kwezi supermarkets xa ufumene iCovid kuthiwe phuma kungenomntu baninzi andiqeshwanga mos andithi. So into yongaqeshwa kwabantu kuthiwa funeka singayi-understanding ngathi is a mere economic problem. It is an economic problem, but it is also a tactical, capitalist, imperialist, racist problem. Because kubalulekile Thobani kwilizwe lencindezelo uba kubekho abantu abangaqeshwanga ukuze incindezelo iqhubekeke.
Wow.
Khona kuthena abantu elizweni labo beqeshwa
bengaqeshi bona.
Kuthena abantu elizweni labo bengenamhlaba, kuthena elizweni labantu berenta bengezo landlords. Ubuyazi bathobani phambi kwe-apartheid iphele uba amabhulu ayene property i-South Africans azirenta emabhulwini. You understand? Ubuyazi into yoba uSasol wa-establishwa ngamabhulu establishela into yokuba makathini makakwazi uba abe independent, amabhulu akwazi uqhubeka nobomi bawo even in instances Thobani where they were under sanctions, and those sanctions were also not enforced by the United States of America and Britain. But they built they built Eskom in 1920, in the 1920s. Eskom. It was not a private company. Eskom was not a private company. And today they are telling everybody that Eskom must become a private company.
Yeah, must be privatized.
But it does not matter. You don't solve the problem of this country by hiring a black person at Eskom. You are simply shifting the problem
to another individual.
You are creating. Yeah, understand? You are going to get your land back merely by voting.
Yeah, but Lunga, I just want us to touch on a few messages that are available on our WhatsApp, and zawucela mana ukuthi sihlale nawe ukuthi kuyobetha pha 10 o'clock. What an insightful conversation phayana. Now mphulaphula, you can send in your messages and your voice notes pha 0636987566, and of course we'll definitely get to them. Bakhona ke abathumele ke imiqhafazo yabo pha khona ke ongenile esithi izwe lethu ephakamisa izandla esithi buwa nkokheli. Wangena ke nomnye pha esithi please ask Lunga to speak about how they intend to deal with corruption, and does he believe that the inferiority complex in our leaders is as a result of this cultivated suppression. Ngumbuzo ke lowa endizawufuna ukuba ugcine but at the back of your mind kuthiwa please ask how they intend to deal with corruption, and does he believe that the inferiority complex in our leaders is as a result of this cultivated suppression. Umphulaphuli ke lowa thumele that beautiful message and a question there. Ukhona ke omnye naye ongenileyo phaa esithi how is the idea of individual instead of national land claims making our case worse from Onhlanhla Ngidi? Ndifuna ke uzibhale phantsi ke Bhutlunga ezayo laa mibuzo leyana. Wangena ke nomnye umphulaphuli phaya. Let's just listen to this voice note.
Thank you, DP, for your reflection and pointing out some of these things that are not so obvious to some of us. But before you close, may I ask that you kindly provide 3 things that you think we, as the people, or if you were to be government tomorrow, we will then need to do to put this country into a right path, if I may say, or really to undo some of the things that have counted against the people of this our beloved motherland.
Wow, what a beautiful question there. Zikhona ke ezinye Bhutlunga apha kodwa ke ndifuna nje siqale ngalena imibuzo ethunyeleyo kwephayana. Masiqale ngalona wokuqala othunyelwe ke phaa ngumphulaphuli sithi ba how do you intend to deal with corruption, and does he believe that the inferiority complex in our leaders is as a result of this cultivated suppression? Masiqale ngawe bhuti.
Yeah, okay. So let me just say on this question of corruption. At a practical level, Thobani, corruption must never be treated as anything different from treason. No, corruption if negithathwa ngoba kukuvukela ilizwe, ukuvukela umbuso. You see, as long as the corruption is treated criminal, is a petty criminal offense, umuntu 5 years ejele aphinda abuye. Why up usha brick siyamazi ba why
without even paying back the money.
Wabuye wahamba odlala igolf. Kwaxa kubuza kodwa hayi usha brick shake kodwa hayi wathi umuntu wayenguminister ka Justice ka Correctional Services ngalo mini wathi hayi uyagula ukufa. Ke nama ndimazibuza ububha nini ke andizukwazi ukuthi mangakhutshwa kakugulela ukufa. Wahamba odlala igolf emva koko. In other words, corruption ayongxaka. Ayenziwa. You see, it's not taken seriously.
Seriously.
To treat corruption as a treason, it must be treated with life imprisonment with no chance of parole.
Sure. And that is so true because Nyani was something that is we take it lightly. You see what the consequences are. It's something. It's just a slap in the wrist, basically.
Absolutely. And politicians know that if they get caught, they are going to buy the law because they've got money to buy the law. And people who are this idea of dealing with corruption at a superficial level again needs to be dealt with. But you have to make it a treason. But secondarily, but in fact fundamental, not secondarily, when I talk about if corruption is systemic, it is embedded in the system of capitalism. Because that is a system of greediness, system of exploitation, system of invasion and imperialism. Then that's the real corruption, Toban, is when somebody works for you and you give them less money than they've worked for. And that's what capitalism does. Capitalism pays you less than you deserve. Did you know that we worked for white people for free?
Yeah.
When we did not have the dome passes in the 1900s, we worked for them for free, literally. And that was settler colonialism, with a capitalist flavor, or capitalism at a highest level of its own self. So my point, very simply, is that we in the PAC should never think of corruption merely as a problem of society, but it's a problem of the system that needs to be overthrown.
Wow.
Yes, it's a systemic problem.
Okay, yeah. The second question.
The second question, individual versus land claims, the question was, does this not make matters worse? Yes, it actually literally makes the matters worse because Utabani has to go alone in a court of law and say, this is my father's land. How do you prove, Tobani, that your father's land was taken in 1913? Now, and yayiqonda lento iphazamisa lento ithi umhlaba ubhilonge ebantwini yenza ngokungathi umhlaba yinto ebhilonge emntwini. How did we treat the question of land as Africans? Was not land a public property usable by members of the public? You understand? So the fact that Tobani can buy a piece of land now and then suddenly sell it then, this means that the land now no longer belongs to Tobani and his children. And therefore Tobani can also do all sorts of stupid things and leave their kids and leave his kids homeless because he sold the land. It's dangerous. So and this is not to mean that land cannot be used for anything economically useful. It simply means that land does not belong. I mean, now you see, go in. Our Kelly were alarms in the correct?
Yes. True.
You see? So the idea of individual claims, if you read the high-level panel report, by the way, you will realize that they talk about all sorts of corruptions that happen. Where hamba pha uThobana yo claim umhlaba, you see, wabazali bakhe. Xa efika pha afike noma Mantashe pha ezoclaim wakhe umhlaba wabazali bakhe, ezoclaima la mhlaba umnye. Abatsotsi ba-corrupt bahambe bayothenga omnye uperson C eze nathi hayi ngumhlaba wami nami lowa. Kuthiwe ngoku benzela nto kuthiwa yi-communal property association. Kuthiwe izani nobathathe sinidibanise nibe i-community siwunikeni nanonke. Yavengo baxabane ke ngoku abantu because abazifundiswanga i-values of Africanism and socialism and democratic control of their wealth. Because asikho kwelizwe isikolo esifundisa abantu ukuphatha ubutyebi. Ufuna ukukhombela isikolo sibe senye sifundisa abantu, ukukhombela university benye efundisa abantu kwelizwe lase-Azania elebafundisa ukuphatha nokulawula ubutyebi babo nokukhulisa ubutyebi babo. That's a big problem. What we are asking for, and to the latter question that was asked by another gentleman, things that we need to do immediately. If the PAC, for example, were to get into power tomorrow, and that's what people are scared of, we were going to make the buying and selling of land illegal, period. You can't buy, land cannot be bought or sold. Land can only be used. Yes.
Yeah.
And this is not so foreign to reality, actually. You know, if you think about it. It's not actually very foreign. It's in the spirit of human beings to use land. But at the same time, to make sure that they don't take private ownership of it, but that it remains a public property that can be used for development, any kind of social development that land can be used for. This does not mean that the governing party does not have land as we speak. The governing party does have some land, but it is acting like a speculator, like a capitalist, also like an entrepreneur. It's looking at what, it's speculating with that land, and it's speculating with land whilst people have no place to stay, have no places to live.
Oh, so true, so true. And the Koko pockets has needs of land that have till today that belong to our government, and till today they have not been dispersed. We are serious about this thing of allocating land to the people.
So what has happened to Bani in the governing party is that they have, some of them believe in what they call nationalization, and I think some political parties believe in what they call nationalization. But we don't just believe in nationalization, we believe in nationalization for socialization. You understand? Because you can now say that there is a land in the hands of the state. That's quasi nationalization. What do you do with that land that is in your hands? Who controls that land? Why was Walter Mantashe fighting at Kolobeni to impose an Australian mining company against the will of the people? Was it not the arrogance that the government can tell people what to do in the land?
Flexing again their muscle, what you were saying earlier on.
Yeah, and that the people themselves must have no say. You see, bribe abantu baphikise into yokuba umhlaba mawulawulwe ngabantu. Bafuna unika ikhampani yase-Australia. So we talk about nationalization for socialization of that land. And the second thing that you need to do is you need to understand that the world the world economy is financialized. Financialized. It's controlled by the global finance capital, big finance corporations. Your big finance institutions like your Barclays, your Standard Bank, your Old Mutual, your Sanlam, etc. These big, whether they are stock brokers or they belong to their real estate, they're in the real estate market, or whether they're hedge fund managers, whoever they are. But you need to take control of the financial institutions, because these are the same financial institutions that cause havoc in the economy by printing too much money. At times. Or, I mean, if you can take a simple case of the economic recession in 2007. That was as a consequence of capitalist greed. It was capitalist greed at its best.
And which this is something that is lurking right now around the corner.
You understand? And so that's the challenge. You've got to take over the financial institution. You don't just nationalize the Reserve Bank, right? Because the Reserve Bank is one component. It's the governing a component. And by the way, this national bank, this Reserve Bank is controlled by a few shareholders, a few group of people who call themselves, who regard themselves as capable of thinking and investing on our behalf. And we are sitting on the sidelines. So you don't just take over the Reserve Bank. You also take over the financialization of the economy. You see, why is it that people go and insure themselves in big private corporations? Whose economy do they build by doing that? Who do they help by doing that? Who do we help when we do that? Because we do that a lot. So you have got to take over the finance. You have got to take over the monetary policy of your country. So in other words, you take the fiscal part of your country in the form of what you do with state revenue. On the other hand, you take direct control of the monetary policy, the part that deals with money. You understand? And that to me is very crucial, because the world in which we live in now, you can't begin any form of development unless you've got what they call a startup capital. But in the PAC, we don't just talk about a startup capital for a particular individual, because we are advocates of socialism also at an economic level. So we accept the view that Tobani must go boleke imali pa yedwa ogqiba ancikiva abanye abantu ubomi babo bonke abenze izicelo zakhe. Understand? So we take the view that you need to, if you want to create an equitable distribution of economic resources, then you must take control of the productive forces. You must take control of production itself. So ingxaki yethu ke Thobani asina control ye production. Thina simane si-includwa kweli cala kuthiwa yi-distribution. Then ke ngoku abanye abantu ke ngokubona bayo-includwa kulaa concept kuthiwa yi-redistribution.
Ndiyakuva.
So I control production, we control net distribution, because distribution depends on production. We control quasi control over what you can go and buy from a supplier.
So you're always at the mercy of the producer.
At the mercy of the supplier. Bamabhula funa singatyi ngasasilambile ngomso. Bamabhula funa singatyi.
True.
You understand the point? I mean your listeners must understand very critically. Singangatyi kweli lizwe ngenxa yamabhulu xa bengafuni sitye ngomso. Because ngawo anolawulo lwefama zeli lizwe.
Ndiyakuva bhuti.
Over 72% of commercial farms are controlled by this guy.
And yet we are just distributing.
You understand? Funa ukuconnectela ngokwinto zibembili ke ngothoba. Uconnectele le question ye agriculture. Ne question ye energy independence. Ngapha Thobani bafuna ulawulo Eskom. Bafuna uEskom privatize. I-ANC ke yamosha kudala yamosha ingangeni nakwipower, yamosha ngofuna uxoxa notsotsi. Yangena yangitsotsi nayo ngoba bafuna uEskom banento bathi zi-IPPs basibhidisa ngamagama esilungu besazi
independent power production.
and inkoliso abantu belizwe bayazi i-economics. Ndiyabona kakuhle na. So babhidisa abantu wena Thobani. So all I'm trying to say is abelungu bakawucima umbane ngomso xa bethanda. Yiyo nto kumane kucinywa umbane. Bafuna lo mbane side siwunikelezele ezandleni zabo. Bamane bewucima. Bayaze bawucima uthi bam enyimini because asiyilawuli inatsika i-process e-production yamalahle kwelizwe.
And if they want, they can just shut down. Sure. But Lunga, I'm sorry that I have to cut you. We are 5 minutes after after 10 o'clock.